really, really into, womb yoga, like, so discovering discovering this again, like, because I had no connection to it whatsoever. When it came to like masturbation, I wasn't doing it. It was like this idea that I'd grown up with, like, as a teenager, where it's like, like, good girls don't touch themselves, because I grew up in an all-girls Catholic school.
That's Jenny Keane, and this is episode 5 of the Yoga Life podcast with me, Kevin Boyle. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Yoga Life podcast, where I talk about everything from teaching yoga to practicing yoga to what to eat when you're not doing yoga, and how to live a more yogic lifestyle. Well, how to try to live a little more yogic lifestyle. With me today is Jenny Keane, and I've known Jenny for about a year now. She is many things. She's primarily a yoga teacher, and she's interested in moon use, in mystical things, womb yoga, and everything that has to offer. Jenny's just come back from Thailand. She'd been away for about 7 months, I think. So this is the first time she's been in the studio and her first appearance on the podcast. So without further ado, let's welcome Jenny. Welcome back from Thailand, which is where you were.
Yes.
Yeah. How was it?
It was amazing. I went over there to teach, to take some space as well away from the city, because it's, very easy to get caught up, in a very hectic, busy lifestyle,
Yeah.
You know yourself.
I know myself.
How busy you can get.
True, yeah.
Running from place to place, you know.
Even though, like, as a yoga teacher, you want to be relaxed and calm in class, the bits in between that are not necessarily relaxing.
Oh no, not at all. Like, you're constantly going, and I think that's like something people don't really think about when you're like, teaching yoga. They just like think like, oh, look at those yoga teachers, like so chilled all the time. They've got the life,
Yeah.
But in between, you're like going from studio to studio, and also like, well, I know for me anyway, like, I'm constantly trying to like learn new information, and so like, digesting information as well, and then trying to keep up your self-practice at the same time.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, suddenly, you find in Dublin, I was just finding like that there wasn't enough hours in the day to do everything that I wanted to do, And so Thailand is great for that, because, you're on an island, like we were in Copenhagen.
Yeah.
And so you're on an island, and island life naturally moves slower, and there's more space in the day, you teach like one yoga class a day, if even.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, and like there's a lot of time, for self-study, for self-practice, and also like on an island like this as well, like where there's a huge yoga community, there's almost like too many opportunities to train. So yeah, and so I primarily went over to get into to study more tantra yoga. For me, that was like my main kind of goal for going over. I was very into one of like the biggest things that I have a real passion for when it comes to like beyond teaching like an asana based class would be womb yoga or women's yoga.
Yes.
So yeah.
Go on, Jen.
Yeah, and so for me this is like...
So can I just say, just to preface this, so when we went for coffee, I don't know, it's 8 months ago, you told me about womb yoga, and I think I actually asked you about it because I'd heard of this and I didn't know what it was about, and it was a real eye-opener for me. So go on.
Yeah. So I mean, the reason
what is it first?
So it's it's connecting to your womb space, to your yoni, and that's like encompassing everything. So the vulva, the vaginal canal, and then the uterus itself. And so the reason I got into this was because since I began menstruating, I had an awful time with it. Like, my cycle was incredibly irregular, between like 39 or 75 days. When I was bleeding, it was like at least 10 days, and very heavy, very, very heavy.
Right.
And even when I was a teenager, I had like cysts on my ovaries that would burst, and I'd like go into hospital. They thought that I had appendicitis the first time it happened. And then they asked me if I wanted food, and I was just like, I want 2 burgers. I was eating burgers at the time.
Because I think it's because you're losing so much blood that your body craved.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not too sure, but yeah, they recognized then that it wasn't appendicitis, because if you have that, you're not hungry at all. You know, you've got no appetite. So then I was getting cysts on my ovaries, and had this, and so I was put on the pill quite young, and also to manage as well like hormones. I had like acne all over my face as well, and when I started traveling when I was like about 24, 25, I came off the pill because I didn't want to be on it anymore. And I really didn't want to go back on it, because for me, like, my body just felt better when I wasn't taking the pill. And about a year and a half later, I came home, and my menstrual cycle came back like with a vengeance. Like, there is like a violence behind it now, you know. It was like all this feeling of like repression, you know, for so many years on the pill, and it just came back way worse than before. Like, where I was having, you know, I would know that my moon, or like my menstrual cycle was going to begin, and we call it the moon, you know. Okay. So your moon is going to come. I would know, because 3 days beforehand, I would have an explosive fight with like someone in my family, someone close to me. Like, if it was my partner at the time, or, you know, my family, like, I would have this like rage move through me, like, and suddenly it was like uncontrollable, and it didn't feel like me. And then I was like, oh, I'm gonna have my period now in 3 days. And then I would be absolutely floored. Long story short, I was like working with a gynecologist as well, and she was saying that the only option really for me was to go back on the pill. And this was something that I was like, no way in hell, you know. So then I was told I had PCOS, that I most probably had endometriosis, but in order to be completely diagnosed with that, you'd have to do keyhole surgery, and at that point they'd also laser out the kind of like blood that's like outside of the in that layer. Is that making sense? In the layer outside the womb. No, this is endometriosis, so this is like something a little bit different. And then I was told as well then that I was infertile, and at this point I was like, oh my god, you know, devastated. I like came out and told my mum, and after the test, and then, you know, very quickly I was already into yoga at this point, and very quickly I was like, wait a minute, like, all of this is just an imbalance, like an energetic imbalance in my body. And it's almost like all of these things, it was like this sudden feeling of that, like, all of these issues with like my womb like knocking for attention, to be like, listen to me, like, or even pay attention to me. And at that point I became really into, you know, womb yoga, like, so discovering discovering this again, like, because I had no connection to it whatsoever, you know. When it came to like masturbation, I wasn't doing it. You know, it was like this idea that I'd grown up with, like, as a teenager, where it's like, you know, oh, like, good girls don't touch themselves, you know, because I grew up in an all girls Catholic school, you know. Or that it's like a dirty thing, you know, and I think in Ireland, like, we have a huge amount of shame and guilt around this part of our body, you know, especially as women, you know. So then this, like, you know, got me started on this journey of like getting into this and like connecting with this, and so I began by, very simply, I did lots of reading. There's incredible books and resources out there when it comes to, you know, connecting with your menstrual cycle and bringing it back into rhythm in a natural way, in a holistic way. And I started doing lots of trainings, like, really became like very, like, almost fanatic about like wanting to know absolutely everything about what was happening in this part of my body. And for me, it also as well led me to become very interested in astrology as well. So I was already interested in astrology since I was a kid. Loved reading horoscopes, and I used to pretend I could like read other people's horoscopes. But, you know, when you get into this, like, part of like syncing your cycle to the rhythm of the moon. And I was like tracking everything like on an app, you know, and I was like checking like my hormones, my sleep level, and like how I was feeling from day to day. And then I became very interested in like where like how I was feeling in conjunction with where the moon, like what sign the moon was moving through. Because whereas the sun sign moves through the zodiac every like month or so, which is why I would be a Leo being born in August. When are you born?
February.
What date?
26th.
Oh, are you on the cusp? So are you Aquarius?
No, I think I'm
Pisces. Yeah. Ooh,
you can tell.
Pisces. I mean, I don't know.
What does that mean?
Pisces. Oh, so Pisces is like the last sign of the zodiac. Right. And so Pisces is said to be like the old soul of the zodiac, of the zodiac family, and it's said to consume the energy of every sign that's come before it. And Pisces is very like it's very watery in nature, and very healing energy, and like I love Pisces, you know, very much like it's about like it's like think about it as like this like kind of dream like quality to it, can become like very fanciful as well, you know, and the way like Pisces move, like they can kind of move like they're in a dream as well, like that they're kind of like just like sashaying through life, you know.
Has it got any bad points to being a Pisces?
I mean, that can also be a bad point as well, because sometimes you become very like unearthed, you know, where you're like too much kind of like in fantasy land, and you know, sometimes it can be hard to be in the physical world, you know. Like all signs have their energy where they're in balance, and then where they're in excess, and then where they're in depletion. Right. And so they all like, you know, they all work in different ways. Like it just kind of we can be in those states as well, like in you know, at any given moment in time, even during the day as well, you know. So, just take something to.
So does all of that tie into, do you teach that when you teach womb yoga, do you teach about, is it astrology or astronomy? Astrology.
Yeah.
Do you teach that as well? What do you do like when you're teaching?
Womb yoga? Well, for me it begins with just giving women space to come back into connection with the physical aspect of their yoni and their womb. So like encouraging women like to look at their vagina, like to look at their vulva, you know,
with a mirror.
With the mirror, yeah, to like, you know, to look at it. Like, so it's so interesting because when I was doing workshops last year, I gave like a sheet of paper out, and it was like just like a drawing of the vulva, so the outside of the vagina, and there was like 8 boxes, and I gave it to them and there was like little points. And each part of the vulva was like just to name them. And it was so interesting to me because, you know, and this is something that I found as well, like this is why I do this, because when I started with this, I was like, wow, like I'm actually not entirely sure like what this is called and what that's called. And like when you give these papers out to people, like this can be some of the most profound things, because this is on our body and we don't know. We don't know the anatomy, you know, we don't know what this is called, we don't know what this is for, and so yeah, when I was doing the workshops, I would give it out in every workshop, and there was one woman who got all 8 of them right, but that was because she was a GP. Okay. But after that, like most people were getting like at most 4 out of 8, you know. Wow. And so, you know, even this, you know, like a part of our body that is so important to us, that is an integral part of our femininity as well, and just that we don't engage with it, you know, it's like it's hidden and we don't, you know, want to talk about it, and even talking about it can be like hush hush or, you know, embarrassing or, you know, this kind of thing.
Yeah, because I think hearing the word womb yoga would make me think, firstly, it was for women who are like prenatal women, that's into pregnancy, and then once if I understood that wasn't the case, then I would think it was going to be very intimate and would make me feel, I'm trying to imagine myself as a woman, it would make me feel uncomfortable going to one of these workshops, because how intimate and extreme is it going to be? So how far does it go, basically?
As far as you want. No, but I mean,
in Ireland, you know, people aren't as open as they are in other cultures. Same in England, we have a similar culture.
it's true, but but actually, it's not just Ireland. Like, this can be a scary thing for any woman, you know, to find that you're not connected to like this part of your body. And I mean, in the workshops itself, like I very much went into like we explored information first, you know, and you're playing games and. Like, so for example, we would start with the woman's cycle, you know, and you explain about your menstrual cycle and how it how they say that in every one woman there's 4 women, okay, and this is like as you move, because we're cyclical beings.
In everyone, what does that mean, everyone?
Yeah. Like, I feel like as well, like if men knew this, they would understand women more. Yeah,
interesting.
When I was in Nepal, I actually gave I was in a Buddhist monastery for 6 weeks, and I was speaking about womb yoga there, and some of the girls became really interested and wanted to know about it. And then there was one of my friends there who's a man, and he was like, I think you need to tell this to the men as well. And he's like, I feel like I understand my partner now.
Really?
Yeah, and so this is to do with the fact that like we're all cyclical beings. Yeah, we're all cyclical by nature. That women move through a cycle, and that is something that we can't ignore, and that we can't pretend doesn't exist, you know. So when it comes to our menstrual cycle, they say that there's 4 women in one woman, and so this moves through the archetypes, you know, of the women. So they say that when you're bleeding, and there's 2 different versions to this. So if you're bleeding on the full moon, then you this is really more about tapping into that wise woman. So you're tapping into Mother Nature, where you're opening yourself up to receive insights, you know, whether it's like centuries ago would have been, you know, to receive like messages, you know, or to receive what's the word called? I've forgotten it. Where you're psychic. Psychic messages.
Okay.
Yeah. I
told you that.
You did, yeah. Thank you, Gavin. Psychic messages. So, yeah, and then if you're bleeding on the new moon, then actually what you're tapping into is, or trying to sync your cycle to bleed on the new moon, then what you're syncing into is to become fertile and to become pregnant, actually. So there's 2 different aspects. But for example, if we're bleeding on the full moon, so this is considered to be moving through the seasons, yeah. So this is the winter time for women. So in winter time, this is like years ago, women would have like gone to the red tents and they would have been menstruating together. You know, like, you know this, like women, if you're like, there's a group of women living together, their cycles tend to like sync together.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Is that true?
Yes, yeah, it is true, yeah.
Okay.
And so that's a very natural thing. It's like happens like from, you know, centuries ago. And so women would have gone to the red tents, and they would have been there to meditate, to be in silence, to be in stillness, and also to be held in a space like with other women, you know.
And what countries would this happen in? What cultures?
Oh, I mean, this was happening across the globe. Like, there's really incredible books actually that you can read. Maybe I could send you some of them. Okay. Do you have like a link that you could put up? Because we could give people books.
Yeah, like
maybe?
Audible links.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but like but
well,
this was
interesting. Yeah, so
like in Native American culture as well. Like in I mean, in Ireland to a certain extent as well. Like, I mean, this was happening like in centuries ago when we were living like in communities, you know.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, how do you think society is affecting that process, as in like affecting the cycles and affecting because what I think is bizarre is that, and maybe it can't be helped, is that now we work in an office for 10 hours a day, how many, don't know, whatever, 50 hours a week, and the time you get, and a stranger looks after your kids, you have no support network generally. We don't know our neighbours. We know people on social media, but we don't know the person next door to us. So women don't have that same community. Like, men can have it. It's a bit more accessible for men. They could join football teams, and I mean, women can join teams as well, but there's not as much out there for women to come together like as a sisterhood, you know, whereas I think there is more for men. And And I just wonder what it's like to be supposedly, like in the States, women far outnumber men in terms of taking antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication. And I wonder how much of that comes from being isolated, you know.
Yes.
So my question is, how do you think, it's a big question, but modern society affects the cycle?
Oh, I mean, it affects it massively because we're in this very masculine dominated world. And like, even for example, like women are stopping their menstrual cycle because it's a nuisance, you know, and it's a pain. And also, you know, when you're, you know, we're emotional creatures, you know, and yet, you know, in work, we're told like that we have to like hold our emotions, that we can't, you know, cry if we want to cry, you know, that like suddenly then it's like, oh, you know, she's just a woman, you know. And so this is like all part of that as well, because, you know, if you were to look really at like the cycle of a woman, like we move through very different cycles, you know. So even for example,
very different cycles to each other,
very different like we become different people through through each like, you know, quadrant of our cycle. So, you know, for example, when we're menstruating, we're more inclined to say no, you know, so or to tell the truth. So if a man is like saying, hey, like this, you know, what do you think about this? And you have like a real strong feeling about something, you'll be like, no. Whereas when you're ovulating, it's the like, oh, equipment. But when you're ovulating, you're moving into summertime. So even looking at how you look at this point, like your like women's lips become juicier, you know, everything becomes like a little bit wetter. There's more life, like women's bodies become curvier, their lips even and their cheeks become rosy, you know, and they're more inclined to say yes to everything. So it's a really good time to ask a woman on a date.
When's this exactly?
That's an hour cycle when she's ovulating, you know. And like even the way she smells changes as well, you know, and that's like, it makes sense, you know, we're ovulating, so we're trying to attract male attention, you know. So you become radiant. So it's like that summertime, and like, you know, in springtime. And the archetype here, so I said the archetype when you're in menstruating is the wise woman. The archetype here is the mother, you know. And so, you know, when you're in springtime, then you have, you know, this time where you're like slowly coming out of your menstruation, and there's still stillness and quietness in the beginning, but then it comes into this feeling of like newness, like a fresh start, and you're suddenly like, wow, and it's almost like the child. There's a lot of innocence in this. And then in autumn time, this is when you're coming into the process of letting go and beginning to shed. And this autumnal time is when women will start to experience PMS as well towards the end of this. And depending on how they have treated themselves, what kind of life they've had for the last month, will determine how smooth or how maybe painful their menstrual cycle will be, or their moon will be, you know. So if they experience like a, you know, a really kind of aggressive PMS, like, or if they experience a lot of pain or cramping, you know, that this all has an effect on how you've lived your life. Have you nourished yourself? Have you taken time for yourself? You know, have you moved? Because, you know, women, like, we need to move our hips. You know, we need to like be constantly, like, that's why, you know, women are curvy for a reason. Like, we're supposed to be moving the whole time, you know. And in Ireland, like, look at the way we walk, you know, like everything is straight, you know, and everything is like very closed, and it's like we're supposed to be, you know, these like sensual, fluid, you know, sexy people, you know, like that like move their bodies. And this keeps, you know, as the lining of your womb is forming, this keeps everything like nice and fluid. And you know, one of the teachers that I had describes it like porridge. Yeah. So imagine you have a big pot of porridge, and if you're not stirring that porridge, then the porridge is going to get clumpy. It's going to stick to the side of the pot. It's going to burn a little bit as well. And so when you're shedding this, it's a lot harder, you know, whereas if you can keep everything moving and fluid and stir the pot the whole time, you know, then everything comes out quite smooth and fluidly. And you'll see this as well. Like, one of the first things that I did when I was connecting with my cycle was I stopped using, tampons. I stopped using sanitary pads. I started instead to use the moon cup and to use reusable sanitary pads. So I also speak about this in the workshops as well, because a lot of people have a fear about using a moon cup, where they're like, oh, what if it goes in and it gets stuck, or they've used it before and had bad experiences where they've still been leaking, or
it's an internal thing, is it?
Yeah, okay. So it's like a little cup, and you insert it inside you, and it catches your blood,
Wow.
And it's amazing because it's also as well allowing you to interact with your blood.
Yeah,
so like you see what it looks like, you see if there's like lots of clotting in it, and it really gives you an indication of how you have been for the last month as well. It's very beautiful. And to cultivate a relationship with your blood that isn't like automatically like, so sometimes when you say this, I say this to my friends, and they're like, oh, like I don't want to touch that. And that's because we have been used to using things like tampons and sanitary pads, which are oxygenated and chlorinated, and so when our blood goes onto this, it instantly becomes toxic and it doesn't smell nice, so like you're taking the tampon out, and you're just like, oh, put this in the bin. And even look at the bin we use, like we don't have, like, it's not a regular bin. Like, this stuff is so toxic that it has to be like, it's a separate bin where a separate man from a company that is in charge of all this comes and takes the bin away, and so our blood is like a beautiful, vital thing. And I'm not saying like, oh, like everyone drink their menstrual blood. I would never say that. Although some people do. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's just like interacting with it and realizing that it's not a disgusting thing, that it's a part of us, and that there's a huge amount of nourishment and like potential for life, because this is what, supports and nourishes the cells, right? If you were to become pregnant, like if your eggs and sperm were to fertilize,
I get you.
Yeah.
I know that works.
That magic. Do you? Give me a little extra.
That's my next question. Where do babies come from?
The belly button.
I can handle that as well. So yeah, what about what's yoni? What does that mean?
Yoni. So yoni is a word that describes the entire female genital system. For example, we have our uterus. Mm-hmm. So this is the womb, and then we have the vaginal canal, and then we have the vulva. So the vulva is the outside of the vagina, of the yoni, yeah? And so most of the time we'll say, oh, vagina, and that's what we'll call it. But the vagina is only saying it's only one thing, one part of it, whereas the yoni takes into account all of it, and it literally means sacred space. So already you're starting to like engage with the way that you consider this space, so that it's not something that's like, oh, I don't want to go there, it's scary. It becomes something that's like completely sacred and very holy. Like we, like women, are wild and holy creatures, and to really honor this part of our body, that we are, if you look even at the yogic tradition, like this area is the sacral area, and it's like this governs, it governs our reproductive organs. But not only that, like, it's not just talking about the sexual area, but this is like also how we interact socially with people, So like this area is called Swadhisthana, and Swadhisthana, like swa means self. And so, and it's actually, its literal translation is like one's own abode, And so it's not just about how you feel in your own self. That's more like Manipura, like your own individuality. This is about how you relate to other people, so community, to the world around you. It's also where you get your creative powers from, and this is where creative expression is expressed, through. And so when it comes to this part of our body, it's so important for us, not only in terms of creating life, in terms of a baby, but like in any kind of life, like we have that creative, vital potential as women. And this is also as well our orgasmic nature, which so many of us are terrified of, or uncomfortable with, or unfamiliar with, because you know, we don't take the time to engage with ourselves in that way, you know, like who sets aside time to pleasure themselves, because nobody has time.
It's not like, oh, I do 50 sit-ups in the morning and then I'm gonna pleasure my, like, it's not like in your diary.
No.
Because you mentioned before about yoni massage.
Oh yeah. And so this is what I went to Thailand for. So for me, when I was getting into womb yoga, I was like reading all the books, going to trainings, and when I went to Thailand, this is actually quite funny.
Can I just say, actually, I probably sound like a complete pervert,
No!
but I think it's important to separate or to talk about sexuality without it being sexual, if that makes sense. So
Kevin is winking at me constantly.
That camera's actually stopped working, so you can't see me now, so I couldn't be doing anything. But,
stop touching my leg, Kevin.
So, go on, continue. While I look down here. Go on, Jen.
Oh, I love you. What was the question again?
You went to Thailand for yoni massage.
Well,
part of it.
It was more like yoni massage for me. So what ended up happening was, so I told you that I had started using the moon cup and not using tampons. Yeah. And on my way to Thailand in December, I used a tampon and I forgot about it. And I didn't have my period while I was over there. And I was thinking, oh, this is because I'm doing so much yoga and I'm doing so much sublimation, so drawing the energy up. And this is something that can be a natural response to that. And so I was thinking, oh, this is why. And then one day I went on this hike and I started to like sweat profusely. But not only sweat, like, this might be a little bit disgusting, but the smell was awful. Like, my friends were with me and I was like, please stay far away from me, because it was just like, I felt like I was like detoxing something actually. And then we went to this market and I had to use the bathroom, and I never used the bathroom in this place because it was not a very nice bathroom. And then I was squatting over the toilet and I felt something move inside me. And so I had this like terror, you know, this image of like, oh my god, there's some kind of creature in my vagina. And so I like rammed my hand up, like, and then I felt this like thing, this string, and I pulled it out and I was in complete and utter shock. And it was a tampon that I'd put in 2 months earlier. Whoa. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I was very lucky that I hadn't gone into toxic shock. And I think because I had been doing so much yoga while I was there, that it was helping to detox my body the whole time. And I really think that saved me. So what came from this was this realization of like how disconnected I was from any kind of sensation in my yoni. And I was like, how did I not feel that there was something there? Like, how did I not feel this? And it was crazy. And I was just like, oh my goodness, like I can't feel my yoni. And it was really this realization then that I was like, I need to do something about this. And so I met this woman, and she was offering yoni massage. And so yoni massage is like an internal vaginal massage. And there's many reasons that you can do this. You can do this for trauma if you've experienced rape. Really beautiful as well for helping to massage out like scar tissue. And my intention behind doing it was brain mapping. So starting to, you know, figure out like the points on your vagina, the K spot, the G spot, you know, the cervix, you know, and really just like allow like brain mapping, you know, so that I could actually have a sense of what was inside me and how it felt, you know, and I was very nervous, you know, I was like terrified a little bit. I was like, oh my goodness, what is this going to be like? And it was the most sacred and profound experience of my entire life. It was so eye-opening. I was like, and not in any way, shape or form, you know, embarrassing or just, I was with another woman and just held in a space that was really, really, there was a lot of trust, a lot of kindness, a lot of support, you know, and a lot of understanding as well, you know, and this is like all of these things, like things that I was looking for, you know. And so like even at one point she was like, you're talking the whole time, and she's like, okay, now I'm massaging the right wall of your vaginal canal. And I was like, oh my goodness, I never realized that my yoni had a right side and a left side before. And that one side could hold a lot of tension and the other side could be quite pleasurable, you know. Even like in certain points on the left side and the right side, how different it is, you know. So you become like highly in tune with what's happening, you know, in your body and how it feels, you know. And that is a very powerful thing, because so many of us, you know, so many of us don't know if we've ever had an orgasm. A lot of women believe that they can't have an orgasm. And so therefore, sex becomes something that they're just doing, you know, or they're doing in a way where, you know, they're just like beating, you know, it's like this like pounding. And that's also, you know, creating more scar tissue and creating muscle atrophy in the body as well. And, you know, creating less sensation. Yeah. So instead, you know, like the nerve endings are like almost like drawing away from the vagina, you know. And in this space, there's absolutely, what was incredible about it was that there was absolutely no need for me to perform, you know?
Perform what?
Like in terms of perform, so like no need for me to be like, oh yes, this feels good, or
okay.
You know,
you
like when you're with a man,
yeah.
you're completely relaxed, you know, and you're allowed to just like really sense your body, you know, and there's no pressure to orgasm, you know. Sometimes you have this with sex, not sometimes, a lot of the time you have this with sex, where with women there's like a pressure to orgasm, you know, and so a lot of women fake the orgasm, you know, and that's, you know, they do that for many reasons. Sometimes it's like to get it over with as well, you know. And so instead you're developing this relationship with your yoni, where it's you know, instead of just something that you're doing, that you're really starting to have like bring sensation into this part of your body, to bring like a juiciness here, to start to like really awaken, you know, the yoni again. And like this for me started to bring my cycle back into rhythm almost immediately. And so when I was in Thailand, like this was my main focus, like to train in this and you know, offer it as something if women want to do it, you know, because this is, you know, what changed my life. Yeah. You know.
So is it available now in Ireland? In Dublin, like as in, can people go for yoni massage?
So I actually don't know anyone in Dublin that does yoni massage here. Right.
It's funny, like you can go for a massage. And the person, you could keep completely naked and then massage every single part of your body. You know, you've got your pants off, they're massaging your glutes. But that one part of the body at the front is the bit that if they touch that, then that's considered prostitution. Or, you know, like, I know it's not as black and white as that, but it's so... yes. The thing is, when you get into I suppose, like pleasuring someone, because a massage is pleasurable, okay? But what you're talking about there, a yoni massage, it's not a sexual thing, it's a pleasurable thing. But people may find it hard to separate the two. You know, they find it hard that they having that area of their body stimulated and it's not a sexual thing. So that could be quite a tricky, not tricky just for, tricky for just the person to navigate in their own mind. You know, how do I, and it's just weird the way we've kind of said that, I don't know if it's because of the Catholic Church, but essentially that part of your body is only for one other person to go near, you know, if that, so, yeah, it's interesting. Random question, but do you believe, I don't know if it's too personal, but do you believe, we can cut this out if it's too personal, so, but do you believe in monogamy?
Oh, monogamy, yes. Yes. Yeah, I do. I think like when it comes to monogamy, polyamory, I think it's very much like an individual thing, you know. I would never ever, you know, put my opinions on somebody else, you know. I think there's a lot of people that want to explore polyamorous relationships the same way people want to explore monogamous relationships. And I think like, you know, who am I to judge, you know?
It's interesting though that like, I think monogamy is almost like a sacrifice that you're making because you love that person. You know, I think to want to be with other people is natural sometimes, particularly if you're younger. But I don't actually think it's natural to be with one other person. But I think that's why it's such a what's the word? what's the word? Not important, admirable sacrifice to make. Is that, and I think life is about sacrifice. It's not about about compromise, and it's interesting that if you're talking about, say for example, if my missus went for a yoni massage, I think initially that'd be hard for me to understand. Like I don't get it. Are you seeking pleasure because I can't give you the pleasure, and therefore, what if I went for a similar service? You know, how would she feel about that? You know, it's
but you see, you're assuming though that this is about pleasure, you know.
Exactly, and I am, and
yeah, because in most cases this is not about pleasure. It's about it's so when it comes to yoni massage for women, like women are going there because they have no sensation in their yoni. And when that happens, you know, they don't feel pleasure when they're having sex, you know, and also what mostly comes up, it's the same way as your body, you know, like there's a lot of tension that we hold in this, like in this society, you know, we're like living in a type A society. There's an awful lot of stress, a lot of women that have like incontinence as well in the pelvic floor, like where they, you know, they wee a little bit when they laugh or sneeze and things like this, like that's very common. And and a lot of people think that this happens because their pelvic floor is loose. But it can also happen in the other direction as well, where the pelvic floor is too tight and holds too much tension, you know. And this is a part of us, like look at like where we teach yoga, how many people find it difficult to breathe a full breath, you know. And so we tend not to breathe down into our pelvic diaphragm. And so this whole area becomes comes under tension, comes under a lot of stress, and it ties into the same idea of like why their menstrual cycle might be, you know, out of sync or not smooth, you know. It all ties into this, and this is about you know, first of all, it's very hard to say what's going to happen in the massage, and that it can really go down two routes, where the massage is more therapeutic, so it becomes more about like myofascial release, internal work, you know. Like there's even cases, like there's studies done where they say that by stimulating the clitoris, it's actually something that can reverse prolapse. So prolapse is like when the uterus is coming out into the into the vaginal canal.
Why would it come out?
It's very common. So apparently like 66% of women have this.
After having a kid?
Not even after having a kid nowadays, yeah. So there's studies that it's like, 66% I think it is. Okay. So women have this.
Because so the muscles are just not strong enough maybe, or not stimulated enough.
And just like, you know, it's the same thing. Like if you're not using it, you lose it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? Yeah, and it is muscle after all.
Exactly. It's just another part of our body. So it can go along like the therapeutic approach, you know, where it's like releasing tension, where it's breaking down scar tissue, or it can go down the tantric way as well, you know, where it becomes about pleasure. And, you know, like a lot of women, you know, especially when it comes to even like female ejaculation, sometimes like there's this feeling of like they need to pee when they're having sex. And sometimes this can actually be like an indication that an ejaculation is coming on, you know, and it's about surrendering and relaxing into this state so that can take place, you know. Female ejaculation is like one of those things that's like quite contentious, you know. There's like a lot of like different like researching like and a lot of it is like clashes, you know, and says like, no, it's this, no, it's not, it's this, you know. I feel like I was going to tell a personal story there, but maybe I won't. Because when this gets submitted to the internet, it's there forever. So think of that way. So forever. My goodness, maybe we could edit a few.
I know, it's crazy. Think about it, isn't it?
It is crazy. It's like
it's there forever. People can download it and then they have it on their phone, and maybe in the year 2080 someone will listen to this.
You're scaring me, Kev.
So just talk freely, you know, it's having a chat.
There you go.
I know, yeah. So on that note, I could talk to you for ages, but thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that as much as myself and Jenny did. Next week I have Brian Malone on the podcast. Brian is yoga teacher. He specialises in breath work and he's a bit of a handstand guru. He also has quite a silky voice, which I think you'll appreciate. I could finish with a word from my sponsor, but I don't have a sponsor. If you're listening to this and you'd like to sponsor the podcast, you know where to find me. All right, thanks so much, everyone. Bye. See you next week.